Assalamu alaikum and Yahudu. This is your host, Brother Askari, also known as Abu Naima, coming at you once again with fresh episodes from the Bowtie Chronicles. The first topic that we decided to venture into, as we told you before, we wanted to go inside and talk about the topic of repatriation. And the reason why, because this is one of the topics that is that's actually in the air at the moment. And so as an African American that has repatriated some time ago, which was in 1999. I feel it important to actually talk about the issue, seeing there is a lot of information coming out about this subject at the moment. At the time that I actually repatriated, there wasn't much talk about the subject. It was just a desire that I had in my heart, just in relation to how I felt and my spiritual background at that particular time, as far as where my heart lied and so forth. So without further ado, we're gonna jump into this topic. I want to give a shout out to two different. One is a channel, and I think the other one is a channel, but I'm not really sure. I haven't been able to find that channel as of yet. But the topic was being discussed in length by a brother that I know, goes by the handle of Political P, and also he's the co-host with a brother by the name of Rizza 786. Okay, and so these brothers are on. Check them out on YouTube. The channel's called The Syndicate. Okay, The Syndicate. All right, so if you go to YouTube and you look it up, it's called The Syndicate. You'll find Political Pete and the RZA, started up a YouTube channel. This is one of their first videos they put out talking about repatriation. Likewise, like myself, these brothers have vast experience with Africa, and they've been overseas. I met Political Pete actually back in 1996, 1997, my first trip overseas to Africa, okay? And me and Political Pete studied together in Sudan. So that's where I met that brother. As far as RZA 786, I've never met the brother. As you'll see inside of their discussion, RZA didn't make the journey with him, and so that's why I didn't meet the brother. And so this is my affiliation with those particular brothers, and I was sent the video, and I looked at it in length, and I have some comments on the video also, and I'm quite sure he'll be commenting on mine. But I want to shout out to those brothers at the Syndicate. You brothers need to cut on your comments so that y'all can get feedback. And I appreciate the video. It was on point. You guys covered a lot of topics, and I've had the same concerns myself. So shout out to the Syndicate, Political Pete, and the RZA 786. Also, there is another video which is by a brother from the I want to say the brothers from Ghana. Okay, and it was sent to me on YouTube, and it under the handle Biafra, Biafra today, Biafra today. And so what the brother does is the brother goes into in length as to the situation of African Americans and how we should come back home, and that the plight of complaining over and over again about the way we are being treated in America, and seeing that we have a reasonable amount of wealth, and that if we were to put that wealth together, that we would be able to do as Acon did and build cities of our own and so forth. And so basically his argument, he gave an example of, in one particular example he gave is in relation to a house that 50 Cent bought, I think, for about 4 million or so. I'm not really, it was up in the millions. And so actually it was more than that, I think. And so when it came time for him to sell the property, it was appraised at 400 or something million. He wasn't able to get the price that he wanted for the house, so he had to accept less than that. And so the brother kind of alluded to it as being a bad investment. Okay, and basically what he was expounding upon is the fact that all of the money that we as African Americans are putting inside of the the American system in their banks and so forth, and still being treated without the kind of treatment that would be humane or civil. And that's a whole nother topic that we'll get into at a later date. But to start off, that's where we're at. And we basically want to touch on the points that Political Pete and the RZA 786, shout out to those brothers once again, that they brought out. But what I want to do first is I want to go back to the beginning of this topic. And I just want to talk about repatriation, as far as just coining the term. Okay, so the definition for the term to repatriate means to go back or to send back a person, especially a prisoner of war, okay, a refugee, etc. And so my own, in terms of what we have been considering ourselves, a slave to his or her country, okay, and in relation to us, because many of us are unfamiliar with what our country would have been in Africa because we've been cut off for such a long time. So now we're talking about replacing the word country for continent. So I want to go back to the first part here, where we're talking about where it speaks about prisoners of war, okay? Because what we have to understand is that some of our scholars, African American scholars, have addressed this point already and have made the point clear that the majority of us were prisoners of war. We are victims of the wars that took place between different groups or different tribes in Africa, okay, and some of those conflicts in which Political Pete and RZA 786 spoke about, they're still present. And so with those conflicts in the past, you had certain tribes that captured people from other tribes, and those peoples from those other tribes were taken as prisoners of war and sold to the European so as to not be attacked by the European and their people not be taken as prisoners. Okay, so we have to understand that part first, is that when we're talking about repatriating, okay, this directly connects or has a meaning in relation to us. And but for some apparent reason, sometimes we'll talk to certain family members or certain African Americans, excuse me, or even Africans, and they don't accept or understand the denotation for the meaning of the word itself, okay? Because they're saying repatriate to where? I'm from here, okay? Which is cool, you could say that, all right? It's to each his own, all right? Because a place that one calls home, okay? If we go back to, terms as far as different languages and meanings of words, all right? One says, this is my home, okay? When we talk about a home in Arabic, the term home, we can call it manzil, okay? And so the word manzil, if you go back to the root of the word comes from the term nazala. So nazala means to come down, okay? And so when we say al-manzil, it is the place in which you go, and when you arrive there, all of the stress that may have been from work or from whatever is afflicting you at that particular point is released, okay? But if you're in a place where you don't have the ability to release that stress that you're living under on a daily basis, okay, so it's kind of difficult to call that place a home, okay? That's for some of us, okay? That's for some of us. Some people have money. Sometimes they don't have to deal with certain realities that the less fortunate, or as my brother would say, humble beginnings would have to deal with, okay? So, okay. So, but for a lot of us, it has a negative connotation. I don't know why, but for a lot of us, it has negative connotation, and brothers don't like to talk about repatriation. I have uncles that, they're opposed to the matter. They're opposed to the ideal of being even having anything remotely connected to Africa. And that's their own prerogative. I think that for us as African Americans, a lot of what needs to, as far as positions that we should have, should come from knowledge, okay? And so the knowledge is what we need to be looking forward to. And so when we talk about knowledge, we need to understand certain points and know how we can be of benefit to the Africans that are already there. And as African Americans coming into that situation, how could we actually benefit them, okay? And not just benefit ourselves, because keep in mind that we had African Americans that went back to Africa before, in Liberia, okay? And for some apparent reason, the arrogance of or the situations spun out of control, and so you had situations like the present situation of Charles Taylor and so forth. And so anyone who is familiar with African Americans have been given permission to return to several countries. But you need to understand, and you need to study, and you need to, there are a lot of ways that we have that need to be checked, okay? With that being said, we need to think about that.